You know, it's almost like your birthday with a package from China, so let's go. Best video game emulator. So it's quite interesting when it comes to this particular subject. Because when you're going to be looking into all of the boxes they've been releasing, you have so many different variables when it comes to, let's say, having a good or bad product. However, the best is not the best for everyone when it comes to that, if it makes any sense. So where I love personally a lot of 8-bit 16-bit games, maybe you want to play some N64. And that makes this video quite interesting to make, where I've selected a handful of products, but also in different kind of categories, with the simple reason because there are so many different ways to play. There are even, let's say, game sticks out there that are just only able to play 8-bit games like NES or Sega Genesis, where some of them are not the best products out there. I still want to deep dive into the rabbit hole to dig through all of the crazy AliExpress junk and checking out for you which one is actually worth our time. However, there are many different versions out there, and throughout the future of this video some things can be changed, particularly I think when you're looking into availability of some products, because some of the products are not available anymore throughout the years. So I want to deep dive into the rabbit hole to search also products you can still find in the future. But let's move on into the 4K game sticks, and we do have a lot of them. And I've noticed a couple of them are kind of good, and also kind of cheap. However, we're having the Y6, the Super Console X stick, and golden oldie by the way. But when you're looking at them, there are like a lot of potential, like we could play a lot of different platforms. So making the 8-bit and 16-bit kind of pointless. So if you like 8-bit or just 16-bit, those game sticks are fun, but if you want to play multiple platforms, these are many options out there. However, let's deep dive into it because a lot of them have a lot of potential, but also were really cheap nowadays. So where the Super Console X sticks was an interesting option, it was quite expensive, and nowadays you can not find it at all, or it's very difficult to find, and they still ask a lot of money for it. So the Super Console X sticks was actually the same kind of idea, only not having a console, but just in stick form, you can just plug it in. They were quite big, so they didn't fit in every system. So specification wise, they were not like really special, with the S905's X chip that can play or emulate all the way up to PlayStation 1 on native resolution. However, this was a quite an interesting cool stick, and one of those golden oldies that are still worth, let's say, finding and maybe looking into. Because if you're going to be playing all the way up to PlayStation 1, this thing had a lot of potential and was a very cool plug and play stick with a lot of options. I just want to experience some old school arcade games, 64th Street, Mortal Kombat 1, where we have some minor limitations when it comes to Killer Instinct Tekken, most games run just fine. But yeah, when it comes to, let's say, Mortal Kombat, I'm always doing this testing simply because it's a very demanding game. We have played it a lot on Pandora's boxes, where it wasn't hit or miss, but with the Super Console X we had no problem whatsoever. So we're getting into N64, a system that I cherish forever, because it has so many cool, let's say, nostalgia games with 4-player configuration. Unfortunately, with these game sticks, it's not playable, and you should look into Battlesera with a mini PC to get an overall good performance there. So where this thing did came with a lot of problems left and right, I think it's still a very fun product to, let's say, play on nowadays, simply because we have so many cool overall, let's say emulators that can run fine on this all the way up to PlayStation 1, having even possibility to play some Sega Nomi, but even PlayStation 1 on the original resolution, it would great in combination with some bezels, because otherwise you're going to have like the widescreen shenanigans that we have seen many times before. PlayStation Portable is a system I personally would remove most of the time, because the emulator, they're using it way too, let's say, old, in combination with, let's say, very problematic issues. That where this particular game seems to be running just fine with the Metal Slug collection, you will see most of the games will not run fine when it comes to three-dimensional games. In some random super sale, I've picked up this kit for $15. Like, it's the same amount you're paying for those 8-bit and 16-bit sticks, and I was thinking this cannot be true. But indeed, they are having these game sticks, 4K game sticks now, and it was actually the Kinhank official, or at least in Kinhank store. If it's official, there's something of a debatable situation, of course, but Kinhank is actually the company doing those Super Console X things. And I was thinking like, hey, maybe they're just rebranding it because that is something they're doing all of the time, as a manufacturer making those 4K game sticks for everyone. However, so I was quite intrigued by it, because is it any good and did it do any improvements, where the game sticks look slightly different. It does come with the same PlayStation 2 chemical cheap controllers with no rumble function, and of course with the cheap SD card inside you should always back up, but yeah, This thing is the same HDMI plug and play situation. But let's take a close look at the menu. Getting some Pandora's box vibes with the menu itself, because it's kind of similar but also better in some ways. So the Pandora's box was actually one of those first products I've checked out, and the menu has been coming back to many different devices including game sticks. To do implement platforms, I'm very happy with this. So you can see we're having all kinds of different platforms, also the 8-bit and 60-bit that we're having with those cheap game sticks. But the game stick itself has a lot of, let's say, interesting features to it. So it's a quite complete plug and play kit, and that for this crazy amount of $15. And again, it's a sale price, so you need to deep dive into sales to get one for not a lot of money. However, when you're going to be seeing what you can do is absolutely awesome. However, it goes all the way up to PlayStation 1 with many of these cheaper boxes or game sticks. But also we have a search option that seems to be working quite fast, and that was another problem I've noticed with a lot of these cheap game boxes, game sticks. So favorite list and even in history list. So there's a quite extended menu when it comes for playing old school retro emulation. So pressing select and start give you the exit game save state. Let's make a save state. We can make it save, so it actually like remembers with a tiny screenshot, so that is cool. Loading, we do have a different video display effect with fast CRT scan line, and yeah, that is kind of cool. Whoa, okay, that looks really awful. No input lag of the audio, so emulation performance is quite good. So let's go into the supersonic mode where we're going to be running like crazy. Sometimes we do have a lot of screen tearing going on. No, it's not, at least not noticeable. So for Game Boy Advance emulation, oh, it's not bad at all. I do have an idea that there is audio delay. Would that be the problem that I went for a different approach of the... Why do I get the idea that it's actually going to be looking into the fast? I think it's personally that I think I see something, but no, it is just working like it's supposed to be. So when you're looking into this, it's kind of interesting, and overall emulation performance is quite nice. For playing the beat 'em up games, D-pad is just working fine. So far so good, exit the game, and that's it. So example, I'm going to be booting it up again. If you want to go into loading time, going to be loading, and that's it. So when it comes to the quick load, quick save, I love it. So let's move on to the NES. And I have seen a lot of weird overall emulation, but so far the overall emulation performance is quite good. I don't notice any screen tearing or whatsoever. They implemented the turbo buttons. Then next up, let's take a close look at the Game Stick 3D. So this one was also known by the Pow Kitty. And nevertheless, let's check out, is this thing any worth your money, your time, and etc. So the big brand is called 3D Game Stick, and they're just selling this thing under different names. For example, the Game Stick Y6. So what I'm actually going to get is first of all a very nice fancy menu. Here we're going to get ourselves like a quick menu, and here we can see that we're having select and start for the special options. X for search, favorite Y, B for back, and A for select. At the top we're going to get different kind of, let's say, platforms, and there are a lot of them from the 8-bit, 16-bit era, even some pocket devices like the Game Gear and the Neo Geo Pocket, and Mega Drive 32X. There's a lot of cool stuff you can actually play with it, and a lot of new features. At the left side we're going to get ourselves just a list with the games that are on there. I did notice some of them are having an alphabetic order, but some don't. And touching a certain controller will also give you an indication which controller is basically navigating through the menu. And last but not least, we're going to get ourselves a tiny screenshot for every single game that you're going to be choosing. I think it's pretty cool. There is no video that we have seen before, but I think they're doing this because it takes up a lot of space, having every single time a tiny, let's say a tiny video playing when you're actually choosing a game. So when you're looking at the menu, they changed it out with all the previous models. First of all, when pressing up and down, this is the same like always, you're going to the next game. By pressing left and right, here we can choose different kind of, let's say, category. And pressing the shoulder buttons, here we're going to skip basically a page in the certain platform. Okay, let's take a close look at the search functionality. Pressing X, I'm curious if you're going to have a delay. I've noticed with some of the sticks it's really annoying to search because you're going to have the feeling that it needs to be loading every single time something. But they completely not messed it up this time. Still, they're messing stuff like that up. Absolutely unforgivable, no aspect ratio. So that is something also that they can improve in the next model. But graphical wise, it will run on original resolution so far I can see, but it runs pretty damn smooth and everything looks quite nice. Next up, I wanted to try some MAME emulation just to see what we're actually going to get. So enter some credits. I do see this weird, very strange filter over it that trying to look at it a little bit better, or that's the feeling I'm having. Pressing select and start will give you the same option like before, but pressing both joysticks. Here we're going to get ourselves into the emulator settings. So I think it's pretty damn cool. Here game information, game history. We can even implement some cheats if you want to. Let's say infinite. Live can be set to on. Alright, there we go. And here we are. We have infinite life and we can just cheat the system. So I think it's pretty cool. That is an option we don't have with every single device. That we can go into this. So first of all, I found it interesting to see that we're actually going to get PlayStation Portable running on a game stick for that amount of money. But take consideration that there are some options we don't have like with a Pandora's box. First of all, we cannot play together with a friend. That is one of those unique features that they implemented in Pandora's boxes. We don't have this, so it's actually just a one-player system. Nevertheless, when you're looking at the gameplay, the button layout seems to be working like it should be. So that's the part they didn't mess up. Let's take a close look into a golden oldie. Yeah, this Super Console X where all of the craziness started. But when you're going to be looking, and this is important, if you're going to be waiting and looking into sales. I noticed this older model getting in sales for like $35 sometimes. Depends where you're living, because I did notice people saying like, depending where you're living, sometimes the discounts can be different. But I noticed if you're getting a Super Console X, where this is absolutely not the best version, don't get me wrong. Some time ago, I noticed this thing with the S905 chip still in it. Still the old configuration or old stock, but they were having this for super sales like $39. And that is kind of cool, because the older Emulator they're using on this, it's not the best one. We're still missing out many platforms like Sega Saturn, and maybe we have like overall okay performance with some newer systems, all the way up to PlayStation 1. We have some overall great performance on native resolution. And if you can grab this thing for, let's say, $30 or $39, it's going to be crazy. I think that would be an amazing deal. And that's the reason why I added this to the list of, let's say, best budget emulator. And the simple reason, because this is just a very cool emulator to play all of those old school retro games. So the only downside of this model was that it didn't have like any active cooling. So if this thing will survive in the future is of course a debatable situation. Later on they released the same kind of handheld, only in a different configuration with a nice case, a different color, and also with a bigger storage capacity of 256 GB. So the internals were exactly the same, and the same chemical PlayStation 2 fake wireless controllers with no rumble function whatsoever. With the same kind of case, only in different colors. I don't know if they keep selling this because this was like weird like X Pro model they call it, but in the end when you're looking at the bottom part, it's exactly the same. There was no active ventilation. I still find it very strange all the way to today that we're having, let's say, the exhaust is actually at the bottom. Makes no sense. And also when it comes to the software is exactly the same. And sometimes I did notice with those cheaper ones you have like a newer version, but like the S905 is not capable of running higher than PlayStation 1 or at least decent enough to enjoy. Think about N64, Dreamcast, there was no Sega Saturn at all, and the PlayStation Portable runs really choppy with most games. But again, this is a very cool, cheap way. If you can pick one of these things up for not a lot of money, I think we have still thousands of different games that you can actually play and enjoy yourself with. I'm just going to be honest, like this is absolutely running garbage on a cheap system like this, but some games are playable, beside of course the Cruising the USA. You can just hear that it struggles. So if you want to run this, you need to have more power. And it's not going to be working great on a cheap one like this. There are some, let's say, launch titles that will run okay on it, but I'm more like, if it doesn't run, why like bother adding it, you know? Alright, so next up let's try Stick Naomi, and just wanted to see what happened when we go to play some Marvel vs. Capcom 2. But a lot of stuff will run okay, and that's something I just wanted to show you in this part. Of course, I did notice that some of these emulators we can see some glitches. Okay, so next up I just want to try to PlayStation 1. Basically, like, PlayStation Portable is way more like difficult to emulate on these cheap boxes, but what you can see, even up to PlayStation 1 we can play it. The more demanding games like Bloody Roar will run fine. They will run on native resolution, so don't forget you can even upscale with some emulators, but not with this hardware. So, particular one is the Cube version. We have the first edition, I think the most common one will the X3. And the X3 chip, I just love this thing, because where you cannot play everything like Wii, GameCube, PlayStation 2, but this is just perfect if you don't really care about those platforms. If you just want to get into the old school stuff, think about the 8-bit and 16-bit era, having different kind of handhelds. Also here we do have limitations, so one of the more familiar ones is even having like 1,000 of arcade games or Neo Geo games you can boot up and play. So when it comes to MAME Arcade, there we don't have the option to actually play Tekken or some more advanced games. But where I always like speak about limitations, we can still play a lot of cool stuff. Where I love these, let's say, basic boxes for 8-bit, 6-bit, PlayStation 1, you name it, you can just actually play them just fine. And the later systems where we do have upscaling options, or we're going to be deep diving in later on in this video, we don't have all of these options because these devices are not powerful enough. But for plug and play cheap solutions, yeah, this is just great when it comes to that. So N64 will always be a mixed bag with these low-end stuff, and in combination with Emulator 3.9, I think the emulation is just what it is. But some games are just playable, beside all the glitches and slowdowns. Just perfect. Music is great. But what I noticed, like this control I'm using now works way better.